You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with Jacob Morrison.
Kind of a unions 101 thing or a workers' rights 101 thing that a lot of people, even in unions actually, they don't really know what it means. Right to work and at-will employment. A lot of people think they mean the same thing. Or I've actually had some people say that they think that right to work means that unions are illegal in a state. Now, this is not to understate the detriment that right to work laws are to unions, but it's a pretty narrow law in actuality, and that is that over the government comes in to the contract negotiations between the two private parties, the union, the workers, and the employer, and they say to these two parties that are negotiating a contract, there is one clause that you cannot put in your contract or that cannot be enforced, and that is a clause that says to be a worker here, you have to pay agency fees to the union to represent you. And the reason for those agency fees, for those representation fees, is because as a member of this workplace, you benefit from the union's representation, and so you should have to pay for it. And of course, we know that the government there are lots of things that are conditions of employment that the government doesn't care about, or that conservatives don't care about, and they say, well, if you don't like it, you can go work somewhere else. But this one is something that they take a special interest in because they don't like workers having power. Right to work is a very narrow law that only does that has no other implications other than the fact that it weakens unions. At-will employment is something that is different, that a lot of people think mean the same thing as right to work. At-will employment means the boss can fire you for any reason or no reason at all, so long as it does not conflict with federally protected rights. And so that is your right to not be discriminated against. That is your right to not be retaliated against or fired for organizing a union. Your right to organize a union is a federally protected right. Now we can talk about how well that is enforced and what you have to do to enforce that, but they can't fire you, and you do have some amount of recourse for that if they do. And so those are things that are really widely misunderstood, and the best way to combat at-will employment, which is really a much more, in my view, a much more nefarious thing than right to work, is unionization, because in virtually all union contracts, by virtue of the fact that it's so important to workers, they negotiate just cause clauses, meaning you cannot be disciplined or fired unless there is just cause, unless there is a reason other than the boss forgot his coffee this morning to be fired or retaliated against, for you to be fired or retaliated against. And so those are three things that kind of swirl around together, and I wanted to pull them out and define them for people. And Connor, if you have do you have anything else to add to, right to work, at will, just cause, anything like that?
I think that right to work is a really interesting thing, and I like the way that you put it, that it's the government interfering in the negotiations process and saying, no, you can't negotiate this. Because I actually talked to a lot of folks in labor in Montana and New Hampshire a couple of months ago for a story I did for In These Times on right to work bills that have been introduced there. And both states, both chambers of their legislatures and the governor are Republican, and both states ended up rejecting right to work. And one of the things I constantly heard from a lot of union leaders, some of them that were, Republicans themselves, is that the government shouldn't interfere in a private contract between an employer and its union. You can't get an agency fee clause unless both parties agree to it. So both parties are saying, okay, we're fine with this. And it's the government basically coming in and saying, no, you can't bargain that, which I think that there's a pretty straightforward argument, no matter where you kind of rest on the political spectrum, that's unreasonable, because the only purpose of mandating that you can't do that is to weaken unions. That's the only reason that it's introduced. And
right, I'm not highlighting that because I'm fundamentally against the government coming in and regulating terms of employment. I think that there are good and beneficial ways for the government to interfere in terms of employment. I think that minimum wages are good. I think that safety and health standards are good, and that is the government coming into a private contract negotiation. But I do want, especially on a conservative talk radio station, I want to illuminate that for folks that this is what's happening when you talk about right to work. Right to work is not it's not a small government thing. It is a big government thing. And so, I'm not opposed to government interfering in contract negotiations, but I do want people to recognize that is what this is, and it's the government coming in and saying to two different parties who would have otherwise agreed to a thing that they can't agree to that thing. And so I want people to recognize that that's what it is.
And something to add here, not to belabor the point, but when you talk about right to work and you're in a unionized workplace, what you're essentially having is the right to freeload.
Yes.
Which again is kind of like a hot button thing for many conservatives. But if you're in a unionized workplace that has a collective bargaining agreement, that union is going to have to represent you in some form or fashion, both through the benefits and pay scales and conditions secured through the contract, and depending on the situation, even individual grievances and disciplinary hearings, regardless of your membership status. So, ironically, the folks who are pushing right to work are in effect pushing a right to freeload off the work and resources that are invested by the union. I love that name, right to work. It's very dystopian. You would think right to work, okay, that means I have the right to a job, right? So that's a federal job guarantee, maybe. I would be all about that, but that's sadly that's not what it is. But it is very commonly misunderstood.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that is really important to understand about right to work, and especially some of the deception that's involved in, a lot of messaging about right to work, is a lot of people, and this is something that you will always hear from some kind of fringe anti-worker groups, is it's about compulsory union membership. Right. You shouldn't be forced to join a union. And compulsory union membership doesn't exist. It hasn't existed in the United States for a long time.
Right.
And agency fees don't force you to be a member of the union. Agency fees just mean that you're paying for the representational costs that you're getting. They can't force you to be a card-carrying member of, UAW or whatever. But you should have to pay for the benefits that you're receiving from having a UAW negotiated contract. Right. So they're not even talking honestly about what it is that it does, because compulsory union membership, it sounds really coercive and yada, yada, yada. That hasn't existed for decades. That's just not a thing. I mean, it has. There's Supreme Court cases on this as well. Right. So, a lot of the talking points that folks hear about right to work, pretty much all of the pro right to work talking points are all distortions. They're all lies. And I mean, the name itself is clearly a distortion.
Yeah, I saw somewhere that when it was first being bandied about, there was a union person who said we ought to call it right to wreck, and I don't know why that didn't catch on. I think that is really that would be a much better word for it, and it seems like it seems like anti-worker forces are so much better at just deciding I'm not going to call a thing what it's called, and then just going with that, and everybody understands what they mean. But if I said right to wreck laws, like, people, even pro-worker forces, wouldn't really, that it would take them a minute to kind of connect the dots on that, which is unfortunate. If you want to see what we are up to throughout the week and get our snide quips about the news of the day, then you should follow us on social media. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/The Valley Labor Report. We are on Twitter at Labor Reporters. I'm on Twitter at JacobM_AL. This week is going to be a really good week to follow us on social media because I think maybe I think at least one of us are going to try to get down to the mine workers rally in Brookwood. It's going to be huge, so you want to be sure to get those updates. If you missed part of the show and you want to watch it later, you can search YouTube for The Valley Labor Report and subscribe to our channel. You can watch the full show, and we clip segments and release them throughout the week. We also upload the program on more than 11 different podcasting apps. So to see if we are on your listening platform of choice, you can go to thevalleylaborreport.transistor.fm/subscribe. We've got a website where you can buy our hats and stickers. Folks, we've only got like 5 hats left. So if you want one of them, you need to get on that. We've only got just seriously a handful left. $35, union made in America. $35, that includes shipping. thevalleylaborreport.org. You can also buy stickers and bumper stickers there as well. And finally, if you appreciate our work and want to help us stay on the air, then you can donate a couple dollars a month to us on patreon.com/thevalleylaborreport.